Hey guys, tonight we are going to take a little trip. Not to a cozy historical village or a sun-drenched ancient city, no. Tonight, we're sailing south. Way south. We're heading to Antarctica, right in the middle of what they call the heroic age of exploration. It sounds grand, doesn't it, heroic? The thing is, heroism is often just a pretty word for prolonged, unimaginable suffering. And frankly, based on what we're about to go through, you probably wouldn't last today. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1910. You're standing on the deck of a ship, the Terra Nova docked in Cardiff, Wales. The air is thick with the smell of coal, smoke, damp wool, and the faint, salty promise of the vast ocean ahead. It's a chaotic symphony of sounds. Thousands of people are crammed onto the docks, waving handkerchiefs, shouting encouragements, their faces a blur of patriotic pride and excitement. They are here for you. For the expedition, you are one of Captain Robert Falcon Scott's men, and you are about to embark on one of the greatest adventures of the modern age, the race to be the first human being to stand at the South Pole. You feel the thrum of the ship's engine beneath your feet, a low, steady heartbeat. You look at your companions, a mix of Royal Navy men, scientists, and rugged adventurers. There's a strange energy crackling between you all, a cocktail of bravado, anxiety, and a shared, unspoken dream of glory. National pride is a powerful fuel. Back then, planting your country's flag on a piece of undiscovered land was the ultimate prize, a testament to your nation's superiority and endurance. This whole endeavor is wrapped in the Union Jack. You aren't just exploring, you are competing, primarily against the Norwegians, led by a man named Roald Amundsen. It's a gentleman's race, they say, but a race nonetheless. You tug at the collar of your tweed jacket. It feels sturdy, reliable. Underneath, you're wearing layers of the finest woolens money can buy from a brand called Wolsey, whose advertisements proudly proclaimed their gear was for all weathers. You feel invincible. What you don't know is that this clothing, so comforting in the mild British damp, will become your enemy. Once it gets truly wet in the Antarctic, it won't dry. It will freeze solid, turning your jacket into a heavy, inflexible suit of ice that chafes your skin raw. Down in the hold, packed amongst the tons of coal and boxes of biscuits, are your secret weapons for the cold Finesco. These are your polar boots, made from reindeer fur, soft and surprisingly light. But here's a little detail they don't mention in the heroic newspaper columns to make them work. You have to stuff them each morning with a special type of dried sedge grass called sen grass. This grass wicks away the sweat from your feet. Every single night, for months on end, you will have to pull out the damp, foul-smelling grass, dry it as best you can over the weak hot stove, and then painstakingly re-stuff your boots the next morning. If you do it poorly, you get frostbite. If you lose your grass, you lose your feet. This is the unglamorous, repetitive reality that underpins all the glory. As the ship's horn blasts a long, deep farewell, and the lines are cast off, a wave of emotion washes over you. You are leaving everything behind. The cheering fades, the familiar coastline begins to recede, and soon it's just you, the ship, and the endless grey water of the Atlantic. The dream is still alive, burning brightly, but there's a quiet question that begins to form in the back of your mind. A question that historians still debate to this day. What is the real purpose of this journey? Is it for the noble pursuit of science to collect the geological samples and meteorological data that the scientists on board talk so passionately about, or is the science just a convenient, respectable excuse for the raw, nationalistic ambition of being first? You look towards the southern horizon, a place that doesn't exist yet on any detailed map. You can't possibly know the answer, and right now, it doesn't seem to matter. All that matters is that you are on your way. The grand, heroic farewell is over. The real journey has just begun. The world quickly shrinks to the dimensions of this ship. Your new home, the Terra Nova, is a converted whaler, which is a polite way of saying chest sturdy, built to withstand ice, but was never designed for comfort. The space is breathtakingly tight. You share your living quarters with a dozen other men in a space that feels more like a closet. Bunks are stacked 3 high, so close that you can feel the walls and hear the breathing of the men above and below you. You learn the rhythm of every man's cough, his snores, the way he grinds his teeth in his sleep. The air grows thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and the ever-present, greasy odor of the ship's engine. The first few weeks are a trial of seasickness. The Atlantic heaves and rolls, and the Terra Nova, top-heavy with supplies, lurches with a nauseating, unpredictable rhythm. You spend your days either leaning over the rail, contributing your meager rations to the ocean, or lying in your bunk, praying for the world to stop spinning. The initial thrill of the grand departure has evaporated, replaced by a grim, stomach-churning reality. This is the first filter. The week of stomach are sorted from the strong. On deck, the situation is even more chaotic. Crammed into makeshift stalls are the 19 Manchurian ponies, your primary hope for hauling supplies across the ice. They look miserable, their heads drooping, their hooves slipping on the wet deck planks with every pitch of the ship. And you develop a quiet bond with the pony in your charge. You talk to it, stroke its neck, and try to calm it during the worst of the rolling. You know its life depends on you, and soon, yours will depend on it. Then there is the sheer amount of stuff. Every nook and cranny is filled. Sledges are lashed to the deck. Sacks of coal are piled high. Boxes of scientific instruments are wedged between crates of canned meat and bags of flour. It feels less like an exploration vessel and more like a floating warehouse that has been hastily packed by madmen. Tucked away in the wardroom, where the officers and scientists enjoy slightly more space, is one of the strangest items on board a pianola, or play a piano. It's a bizarre, almost comical link to the civilized world you left behind. On calmer evenings, someone might try to pump the pedals, and the tinny, mechanical notes of a popular tune will drift across the deck, a ghostly echo of a London music hall, immediately swallowed by the immense, empty silence of the ocean. As the weeks grind on, you start to overhear the debates, quiet conversations in the mess, or late-night chats between the naval officers. The topic is always the same: ponies versus dogs. Captain Scott is a firm believer in the ponies. He used them on his previous expedition and thinks their superior strength is key to hauling heavy loads over long distances, but some of the men who have read the accounts of other explorers, especially the Norwegian, Amundsen, are not so sure. Dogs are faster, they say. They have better endurance in the extreme cold. And then there's the grim, pragmatic reality that no one likes to say out loud: dogs can eat other dogs. When a dog is no longer useful, it can become fuel for the rest of the team. A dead pony, however, is just 400 kilograms of frozen meat that you can't possibly carry with you. Historians still fiercely debate this choice, arguing whether Scott's preference for ponies was a fatal miscalculation born of British sentimentality or a reasonable decision based on the information he had. For you, listening to the arguments on the swaying deck, it's not an academic debate. It's a question of your own survival. Just as you're getting used to the routine, the ocean decides to remind you who is in charge. South of Australia, you sail into a hurricane. The sky turns a bruised greenish black. The waves become mountains of churning water that crash over the ship, sweeping the deck clean. The ponies scream in terror as their stalls are smashed to pieces. 2 of the dogs are washed overboard, gone in an instant. You and the rest of the crew work in a desperate, frantic state, clinging to ropes as icy water surges around your knees. The ship groans, its timbers creaking under the strain. Down below, the pumps can't keep up with the water pouring in. For a terrifying 24 hours, you form a bucket brigade, bailing water by hand, your muscles screaming, your body numb with cold and exhaustion. You are no longer a proud explorer. You are just a man in a small wooden bucket, being tossed around by an indifferent and unimaginably powerful force. When the storm finally breaks, as icy wave breaks, the ship is battered but intact. 2 ponies are dead. A significant amount of coal and other supplies are gone. The bravado is gone too. A new, more sobering understanding has settled over the crew. You are not conquering nature. You are merely asking for its permission to pass. After weeks of open ocean, you see it. At first, it's just a strange bright line on the horizon, or water sky as the old whalers call it, the reflection of ice on the clouds. Then, the first icebergs appear. They are otherworldly, sculpted by wind and water into impossible shapes, ranging in color from brilliant white to a deep, ethereal blue. They glide past the ship like silent, ancient sentinels, and you feel a sense of awe that is quickly tinged with dread. These are just the scouts. The main army is waiting. Soon you are navigating through the pack ice, a vast, shifting jigsaw puzzle of frozen ocean. The Terra Nova was built for this, her bow reinforced to nudge aside smaller floes, but it's a slow, grinding, and nerve-wracking process. The ship shudders and groans as it pushes through the ice, the sounds echoing through the hull like breaking bones. Sometimes the ice closes in, trapping the ship for hours, or even days. The world becomes utterly silent. You only sound the faint creak of the ship's timbers and the distant, eerie calls of Weddell seals. It's a beautiful, pristine, and deeply unsettling environment. There is no life here, save for the occasional penguin tobogganing on a floe, or a seal sunning itself, their presence only highlighting the overwhelming emptiness. And then, one clear, cold morning, you see it properly. The continent. It doesn't rise from the sea like a normal landmass. It presents itself as a colossal, vertical wall of ice, the Great Ice Barrier, now known as the Ross Ice Shelf. It stretches from horizon to horizon, a sheer cliff of ice, 50 to 100 feet high. It looks impenetrable. It looks eternal. It is the edge of the world. It is the edge of the world. This is what you've traveled halfway across the globe to challenge. Looking at its scale, indifferent power of it, a part of you feels a profound sense of futility. Your ship is a speck, you are less than a speck. Captain Scott finds a suitable inlet, a place he names Cape Evans, and the ship carefully moors against the fast ice, the thick, stable ice that is attached to the land. The engines fall silent. After months of constant movement and noise, the sudden stillness is deafening. This is it. The journey by sea is over. The real work is about to begin. The air here is different. It's so cold and dry that it feels sharp in your lungs, like breathing in tiny needles of glass. Reflecting off the endless white is blindingly intense, forcing you to wear dark snow goggles at all times to avoid snow blindness, a painful condition that feels like having sand poured into your eyes. You take your first steps onto the ice, and the crunch of your boots is the only sound in the vast silence. You look around. In one direction, the frozen expanse of McMurdo Sound. In the other, the stark black, volcanic rock of Mount Erebus, its peak trailing a plume of smoke against the pale blue sky. It's an active volcano in the middle of Antarctica, a bizarre and fiery heart in a land of ice. This strange geological fact is a source of fascination for the scientists on board, who are eager to study its unique geology. For you, it's just another piece of the surreal, alien landscape. As you stand there taking it all in, one of the expedition's geologists, a man named Griffith Taylor, points out something odd. He gestures to the dry, snow-free valleys that you can see in the distance, nestled between the mountains. They are a strange, dusty brown, a stark contrast to the white of the rest of the continent. He explains that these are the McMurdo Dry Valleys. They are one of the most extreme deserts on Earth. Due to the surrounding mountains blocking the flow of ice and the incredibly low humidity, almost no snow falls there. It's a little piece of Mars tucked away in Antarctica. Scientists now study the valleys for their unique extremophile organisms, but for you, it's a bewildering sight. A desert of rock and dust in a world made of frozen water. The initial awe, however, is quickly overshadowed by the dawning realization of the task ahead. You are standing on a floating sheet of ice, miles from the actual landmass where you need to build your hut. Every single thing that will allow you to survive the coming winter, every plank of wood, every bag of coal, every box of food, every piece of scientific equipment has to be moved from the ship across the sea ice to the shore, by hand. You look at the tons and tons of supplies still packed in the ship's hold. Then you look at the sledges. There are no cranes, no vehicles, just your own muscles and those of the increasingly stressed ponies. The debate about ponies versus dogs is no longer theoretical. You watch as the first pony is led down the gangplank. It struggles, its hoofs finding no purchase on the slippery ice. It panics. It takes several men to commit and guide it to the shore. Historians still question whether bringing the ponies onto the treacherous sea ice so early was a wise move. Some argue it was an unnecessary risk, placing the animals in jeopardy before they were even needed for the main polar journey. But the decision has been made. The unloading has to begin. And as you pick up the first heavy, awkward crate, you feel your dreams of glory being replaced by the mundane, back-breaking reality of being a glorified mover in the coldest place on Earth. The next few weeks are a blur of relentless, soul-crushing labor. Your life is governed by a simple, brutal rhythm: wake, haul, eat, sleep, repeat. The sun, which now circles the sky without ever setting, eliminates any natural sense of time. Days and nights bleed into one another, measured only by the growing ache in your muscles and the slow, steady progress of the pile of supplies on the shore. Your primary job is to get everything off the ship and to the chosen site for the halt. This involves loading up the heavy wooden sledges to the point of absurdity, then hauling them across the mile or so of sea ice to land. You work in teams, leaning into the harnesses, your boots slipping on the ice. The sledges are heavy, unwieldy beasts. Sometimes a runner catches on an ice ridge, bringing the whole operation to a jarring halt. You strain, you curse under your breath turning to instant frost in the frigid air. The temperature hovers around 20 degrees Celsius. And even though you're sweating from the exertion, the cold seeps into your bones. The ponies are put to work too, but they are not faring well. Their hooves, designed for the grassy steppes of Manchuria, are ill-suited to the slippery, uneven ice. They stumble frequently, and they are already losing condition. You watch them, their heads low, their coats matted with frozen sweat, and you see a reflection of your own exhaustion. These animals are your lifeline for the polar journey, and they are being worn down before the real work has even started. One day, the ever-present danger of your environment becomes terrifyingly real. A section of the sea ice, weakened by the constant movement and the slightly warming temperature of the late summer, suddenly gives way. There's a sharp crack, like a rifle shot, followed by a sickening lurch. The team working with one of the motor sledges, another of Scott's experimental gambles, shouts in alarm. Proves no match for the ancient power of the ice. It slips backward, and with a final, gurgling groan, disappears into the black, freezing water. The men scramble to safety, their faces pale with shock. The machine is gone forever, but it's not the loss of the equipment that truly unnerves you. It's the sudden, visceral reminder that the very ground beneath your feet is not solid. It is a living, breathing, untreacherous thing. As the pile of supplies on the shore grows, the construction of the hut begins. It's a prefabricated building, brought in pieces from England. Assembling it is like putting together a giant, complicated puzzle in the worst possible conditions. Your fingers, even inside your mitts, quickly become numb and clumsy. Trying to hammer a nail or tighten a bolt is a lesson in frustration. You have to constantly stop, swing your arms, and try to bring some feeling back into your hands. The hut itself is an engineering marvel for its time. It has walls insulated with seaweed quilt and cork, and a clever ventilation system designed to manage the condensation that will inevitably build up inside. There's even a partition wall separating the men's quarters from the officers' wardroom, a small but significant reminder of the rigid caste structure of the Royal Navy, transported intact to the end of the world. A strange, almost forgotten luxury is the smell of the pinwood planks as you assemble the hut. In this sterile Central's world of ice and rock, the warm, resinous smell of the timber is a powerful, almost intoxicating link to a green and living world. It's a ghost of a memory, a reminder of forests and sunshine. While you haul and build, the scientists are in their element. They are chipping at rocks, collecting marine specimens from holes drilled in the ice, and setting up their meteorological equipment. One of them is a biologist, and HES fascinated by the penguins. He wants to collect their eggs, specifically the emperor penguin eggs, because he believes they hold a key to understanding the evolutionary link between reptiles and birds. The catch emperor penguins lay their eggs in the dead of the Antarctic winter, in the darkest, coldest part of the year. This planned winter journey is spoken of in hushed, almost reverent tones. It is considered a secondary, but profoundly important scientific goal of the expedition. While you are focused on the pole, a small team is planning a side quest into a level of darkness and cold that you can barely comprehend. Historians are still divided on the allocation of resources and effort during this crucial setup phase. Was too much time and energy spent on scientific side projects when the primary goal, the pole, required every ounce of focus, or was the science the entire justification for the expedition, with the race to the pole being the public-facing, fundraising hook as you drop a heavy crate of tin pemmican onto the growing pile? You're back screaming in protest. You don't care about the historical debate. You just know that you are exhausted. The ponies are struggling, and the continent hasn't even begun to show its true power. The hut is slowly taking shape, a tiny wooden sanctuary in an endless wilderness of white. It promises shelter and warmth, but it will also become your prison. The days, if you can call them that, grow shorter. The sun, which has been your constant, circling companion, begins to dip lower and lower towards the northern horizon. The quality of the light changes. The brilliant, harsh glare of the perpetual day softens into a prolonged, cinematic sunset that lasts for weeks. The sky puts on a final, spectacular show, painting the snow and ice in incredible shades of pink, orange, and violet. It's a beautiful, poignant, and deeply unsettling spectacle. You and the other men find yourself stopping your work, standing in silence, just watching the slow, inexorable descent. You are witnessing the death of the light. On April 23rd it happens. You all gather outside the newly completed hut, a stark, lonely structure against the vast, darkening landscape. You watch as the last sliver of the sun touches the horizon, flashes a brilliant, final green, an atmospheric phenomenon you've only read about, and then vanishes. It's gone. And you know, with a certainty that settles deep in your gut, that you will not see it again for long months. A profound, almost primal sense of dread descends upon the group. The world is now officially divided into two parts: the world of light you came from, and this new world of darkness you have just entered. The transition is immediate and jarring. A permanent twilight settles over Cape Evans. The familiar landmarks around you lose their sharp edges, becoming soft, grey shapes in the gloom. The temperature plummets. Without the sun's radiation, however weak, the cold becomes more intense, more penetrating. It feels like the land itself is exhaling a deep, ancient frost. Your work routine has to change. All outdoor tasks become more difficult, more dangerous. You now rely on the faint light of the moon and the aurora australis, the southern lights, which flicker and dance across the sky like vast, silent green curtains. They are beautiful, but their ghostly light does little to truly illuminate the treacherous ground. Inside the hut, life begins to take on a new rhythm. The main source of light and heat is a single, large carbide gas lamp that hangs in the center of the main room. It hisses and sputters, casting a stark, white light that creates deep, dancing shadows. Your world is now confined to this small, bright circle of light, surrounded by an infinite, pressing darkness. The hut, which seemed a spacious palace during its construction, now feels claustrophobic, small, and is home to 25 men. You can walk its entire length in about 15 paces. This tiny wooden box is now your entire universe. A small but significant detail of your new life is the problem of ice. Not the ice outside, but the ice inside. The warmth from your body is the stove, and the lamps causes moisture to condense on the inner walls. But the walls are so cold that this condensation instantly freezes, coating every surface with a layer of rime ice. It grows thicker every day, a creeping, glittering disease. Your bunk, which is against an outer wall, is permanently coated. If you accidentally touch the wall in your sleep, your skin will stick to it. Every morning, you have to scrape the ice off your little area, a futile, daily chore in a war you can't win. This indoor ice is a constant source of dampness and misery. One of the scientists, the meteorologist George Simpson, known to everyone as Sunny Jim, sets up a complex array of instruments just outside the hut. Part of his duty is to take weather readings every few hours, regardless of the conditions. This means that several times a day, and through the long, dark night, he or an assistant must leave the relative warmth of the hut, suit up in layers of frozen gear, and venture out into the howling darkness to read the thermometers and barometers. It's a heroic act of scientific dedication. You discover something that will later be called the coolest winter of Antarctica. Unlike in the Arctic, where temperatures get progressively colder towards the middle of winter and then warm up, in Antarctica, the temperature drops rapidly after the sun sets and then stays at a relatively stable, horrifically low average for months, before rising sharply when the sun returns. It's a long, flat, deep freeze. The academic debate here is a subtle one, focusing on the psychological impact of the darkness. Early accounts often romanticized the polar night as a time for camaraderie, learning, and quiet contemplation. But modern analysis, informed by studies of sensory deprivation and seasonal affective disorder, paints a much bleaker picture. Historians now argue about the extent to which the leaders, like Scott, truly on this night would take on their men. Was their focus on routine and scientific work a brilliant piece of man management, or a naive attempt to hold back a tide of depression they couldn't possibly comprehend? You, lying in your frozen bunk, listening to the wind howl outside, don't need a historian to explain it. You feel it. A strange lethargy is setting in. The initial excitement is gone, replaced by a monotonous, grinding existence. The darkness is not just outside. You feel it outside. You feel it starting to creep into the corners of your own mind. The great, heroic adventure has become a long, slow, and very dark wait. Your universe is now the hut. This wooden box, smelling of carbide gas, unwashed men, and frying penguin steaks, is your sanctuary and your prison. Life settles into a rigid, unyielding routine, the only weapon against the encroaching madness of the polar night. The expedition's naval discipline is your salvation and your curse. Captain Scott insists on it. Breakfast is at a set time. Shores are assigned and inspected. Dinner is served, and then the evening is for mending gear, writing in diaries, or quiet contemplation. This routine is a skeleton, and you cling to it, hoping it will hold your mind together. You sleep in the mess deck, the enlisted men's area, separated from the officer's wardroom by that thin wooden partition. Your bunk is a narrow plank, barely wide enough to turn over. You have a thin mattress filled with horsehair and a sleeping bag made of reindeer hide. It's surprisingly warm, but it has a distinctly game-wise smell that permeates all your belongings. Space is at such a premium that you have to store your few personal possessions in a small canvas bag hanging from a nail above your head. Every man has his own little world, just a few cubic feet, and you learn to respect these invisible boundaries with a fierce territorialism. The sounds of the hut become an intimate symphony. The constant hissing of the acetylene lamp is the baseline. Layered on top are the snores and coughs of 24 other men, the clatter of pans from the cook's corner, the scratch of a pen on paper, the low murmur of conversation, and most ominously, the ever-present moan and shriek of the wind outside. The wind is a living entity. It claws at the walls, sends vibrations through the floorboards, and finds every tiny crack to send in a fine, suffocating powder of snow. Some nights it feels like the hut is a ship in a storm-tossed sea. Other nights, it feels like a tomb being slowly buried alive. One of your daily chores is ice cache. This delightful task involves going out to the nearest stable glacier, hacking off huge blocks of freshwater ice with a pickaxe, and hauling them back to the hut. This is your drinking water. The process is numbingly cold, and your hands ache from gripping the metal pickaxe. But it's a necessary ritual. Back in the hut, a large barrel behind the stove is always kept full of ice blocks, which slowly melt to provide water for cooking and the occasional berry wash. As a feature of your enclosed life is the weekly ablutions. Once a week, you are permitted a bath. This involves stripping down in a corner of the hut, a screen providing the illusion of privacy, and washing yourself as quickly as possible from a small basin of lukewarm water, using a tiny sliver of soap. The temperature difference between the water and the air is so great that you start shivering violently the moment you're wet, rushed affair that does little to combat the general layer of grime that seems to coat everything and everyone. Now for a truly weird tidbit of hut life, the latrine. It's not in the hut, of course. It's a small wooden shack built a short distance away, a place of profound and unforgettable horror. The seat is just a wooden plank with a hole in it, positioned over a deep pit dug in the ice. The temperature inside is the same as the temperature outside. Visiting it during a blizzard in the pitch dark, with the wind trying to tear the door off its hinges, is an experience that tests the very limits of human fortitude. The surfaces are coated in ice, making everything treacherous. It is, without a doubt, the single most unpleasant place on the continent. The scientific work continues, providing a vital distraction. In one corner of the hut, a biologist dissects a penguin, the smell of its oily flesh adding another layer to the hut's unique aroma. In another corner, the geologist meticulously labels rock samples. But the most important intellectual activity is the lecture series. To keep minds sharp, the officers and scientists take turns giving lectures in the evening. You hear about the intricacies of marine biology, the formation of glaciers, the art of navigation. It's a valiant attempt at self-improvement, a way of reminding yourselves that you are educated men on a mission of discovery, not just a group of shivering castaways. The quality varies. Some lectures are fascinating. Others, delivered in a monotone drone, are a powerful sedative, sending half the room into a stupor. Historians often praise the structured, intellectual life as a key to the expedition's morale. But there's a debate about its effectiveness. Did this rigid separation between intellectual officers and laboring men reinforce a class divide that created resentment? Some diary entries from the lower ranks hint at a feeling of being treated like mere cogs in the machine, their own thoughts and fears given little weight. You and your messmates might be more concerned with the dwindling tobacco supply or the suspicious way the cook was rationing the sugar. You are all trapped in the same box, but you are living in slightly different worlds. And as the darkness stretches on, week after week, with no end in sight, the routine starts to feel less like a shield and more like the bars of a cage. The hut is keeping you alive, but you are beginning to feel the walls closing in. The battle against the darkness is not just physical, it's a war for your mind. With no external stimuli, no sunrise, no new landscapes, no change, your brain starts to do strange things. The daily routine is the first line of defense. But it's not enough. You need more. You need to create your own world inside the hut to keep the vast, empty one outside from swallowing you whole. The primary weapon in this fight is science. The work of the scientists becomes a focal point for the entire expedition. Their corner of the hut is a mess of brass instruments, glass speakers, and notebooks filled with meticulous observations. You watch them, sometimes with a bit of resentment for their cushy indoor jobs, but mostly with a sense of vicarious purpose. Their work gives your collective suffering a noble sheen. You can tell yourself it's not just for water, it's to support the study of ice crystal formation. It's a psychological trick, but a necessary one. The centerpiece of this intellectual defense is the South Polar Times. This is the expedition's own, painstakingly produced magazine. The editor is Apsley Cherry Garrett, one of the younger members of the team. He cajoles and persuades everyone to contribute. You see men who you only know as stoic, silent figures from the lower deck suddenly reveal hidden talents. One man writes a surprisingly funny poem about the ponies. Another submits a detailed, serious article about sledge mechanics. There are cartoons lampooning the officers and the daily grind. The geologist contributes a piece on the formation of Mount Erebus. You too are encouraged to write something, maybe an anonymous story or a joke. The final product is typed up, bound by hand, and then read aloud to the entire company. It's a moment of shared creativity and laughter, a powerful antidote to the encroaching gloom. It proves you are all still individuals, with humor and intellect, not just components of a survival machine. Then there is the music. The pianola, that bizarrely opulent piece of furniture, becomes a lifeline. It's loaded with paper rolls of popular songs, classical pieces, and hymns. Any man can sit down and pump the pedals, filling the hut with a semblance of culture. The sound is tinny and mechanical, but it's music. It drowns out the wind for a few precious minutes. On special occasions, like someone's birthday, there's a sing-along. Voices, mostly off-key, join in with the familiar tunes, a brief, boisterous burst of camaraderie that momentarily pushes back the shadows. A particularly strange and revealing pastime as photographer, Herbert Ponting is a true artist. He has set up a tiny darkroom, a little cave of chemical smells and deep red light. He ventures out into the semi-darkness with his heavy, cumbersome camera and glass plates, capturing images of stunning, ghostly beauty, the hut under the moonlight, the aurora australis dancing over the frozen sea, portraits of the men, their faces etched with the strain of the winter. His work is another form of defiance. He is not just documenting the expedition, he is imposing order and beauty on a chaotic and hostile landscape. He is turning your suffering into art. A little-known fact is that Ponting would also stage elaborate photo dramas. He'd get the men to act out scenes for the camera, mending sledges, discovering an ice cave, or looking pensively towards the non-existent horizon. It was a form of entertainment, a way to break the monotony, but it also reveals the self-consciousness of the expedition. They knew the world was watching, and they were already shaping the narrative of their own story, even as they were living it. But all these defenses, the science, the newspaper, the music, the photography, are fragile. The psychological pressure is immense and unrelenting. Arguments flare up over trivial things: a borrowed book, someone taking too much sugar, a perceived slight. Personalities, once buffered by the open spaces of the outside world, now grate against each other in the confined space. You learn to loathe the way one man chews his food, the nervous tick of another, the booming laugh of a third. These small irritations fester in the darkness, growing into silent, simmering resentments. Historians still debate the true psychological state of the men during the winter. The official accounts, and the diaries of the officers, tend to portray a stiff upper-lip stoicism, focusing on the successes of their mental fortifications. But reading between the lines, and looking at the private journals of some of the men, a darker picture emerges. There are hints of depression, what they call polar ennui, a deep, soul-sapping lethargy. With its emphasis on discipline and emotional suppression, the best way to handle this, or did it simply force the men to bury their anxieties, letting them grow into more dangerous forms? There's no clear answer. All you know is that some days you wake up feeling a profound, anchorless despair. The scientific work feels pointless. The jokes in the South Polar Times fall flat. The music from the pianola sounds like a funeral dirge. On those days, you just have to keep your head down, do your chores, and pray that the feeling will pass. You are fighting a war on two fronts, against the cold outside and the emptiness within. And it's not at all clear which is the more dangerous enemy. The cold is not just a number on a thermometer. It's a physical presence. It's a predator. At first you think you can fight it, that with enough layers and bravado you can conquer it. You learn very quickly that you can't. You can only negotiate with it, and the terms are always in its favor. Your clothing is your first and last line of defense, and it's a constant, high-maintenance struggle. You wear multiple layers of wool, which is good at insulating even when damp. Over that, you wear a windproof outer layer of Burberry gabardine. The theory is sound. The reality is a nightmare. The moment you step outside, your breath, which is full of moisture, freezes instantly on your balaclava, on the collar of your jacket, creating a solid, jagged crust of ice. The simple act of turning your head becomes a painful scraping motion. Your hands are the most vulnerable. You have several pairs of mitts. A thin woolen pair for dexterity, a thicker fur-backed pair for warmth, and a tough canvas outer pair for protection. But any task that requires fine motor skills, tying a knot, adjusting a scientific instrument, even just buttoning your jacket, forces you to take off your outer mitts. You have maybe 30 seconds before your fingers start to burn with a ferocious, searing pain. Then they go numb. This is the first stage of frostbite. You learn to work in frantic, short bursts, then shove your hands back into the warmth of your armpits or the fur mitts, desperately trying to bring the feeling back, a process that involves an agonizing wave of pins and needles. The real terror is frostbite. You see it happen to another man. He comes in from a short trip to the latrine, complaining that his nose feels a bit numb. One of the officers, Dr. Wilson, takes one look at him and says, calmly, "Don't touch it." The tip of the man's nose is dead white. It looks like wax. This is called a frost nip. The treatment is alarmingly simple. Another man places his warm, bare hand over the frozen spot. You watch as the color slowly, painfully returns, first a mottled red, then a deep, angry purple. The man groans in agony as the frozen tissues thaw and the blood rushes back in. HES lucky. If it goes beyond that, the tissue dies. The affected part, a fingertip, a toe, the lobe of veneer turns black and hard as stone. It becomes gangrenous. Then, the only option is amputation. The expedition surgeon, Edward Atkinson, is a capable doctor, but his operating theatre is a corner of the hut, and his anesthetic options are limited. An amputation is a brutal, hurried affair performed with a small soul, a man who is likely only semi-conscious from a dose of morphine. You live in constant fear of this. Every time you feel a numbness in your extremities, a cold dread washes over you. You check your fingers and toes obsessively. A strange, and frankly disgusting, detail of life in the extreme cold is what happens to your facial hair. If you grow a beard, as many of the men do, it becomes a liability. Your breath freezes into it, creating a solid mass of ice that clings to your face. It becomes so heavy that it pulls on your skin. Trying to melt it indoors is a slow, messy process that leaves your face wet and prone to freezing even faster when you go back out. Many men, after a few weeks of this misery, choose to shave. Shaving in the hut is its own special kind of hell, using a straight razor and a basin of barely warm water in the dim, flickering light. The cold also has a peculiar effect on everyday objects. Metal becomes a dangerous material. If you touch a piece of bare metal with your bare hand, your skin will instantly freeze to it. Trying to pull it away will rip the skin right off. You learn to handle everything with gloves, even indoors. Kerosene, used for the lamps, becomes thick and syrupy, like molasses, making it difficult to pour. The simple act of winding a watch becomes a delicate and potentially painful operation. One of the most debated pieces of equipment is the sleeping bag. You have a reindeer hide bag. The fur is on the inside, soft and incredibly warm. However, it has a fatal flaw. The moisture from your body and breath gets trapped in the hide. It doesn't evaporate in the cold. Instead, it freezes. Every morning, your sleeping bag is a little stiffer, a little heavier with accumulated ice. The only way to get the ice out is to painstakingly turn the bag inside out and beat it with a stick, shattering the ice crystals. It's a laborious, inefficient process. After a few weeks of use on a sledging journey, the bag can gain 10 or 15 pounds in weight, becoming a stiff, frozen coffin that is almost impossible to get into. The Norwegians, under Amundsen, used a different system, often with a double bag design that was easier to air out. Historians still argue whether the British designed sleeping bags were fundamentally flawed, contributing to the exhaustion and hypothermia of the surging parties. For you, the debate is academic. Your reality is the nightly struggle to wriggle into a damp, increasingly rigid bag, knowing it's getting worse every day. The cold is a constant grinding pressure. It saps your energy, your morale, your will. It makes the simplest tasks monumental efforts. You are never truly warm. There is always a part of you that is cold, your feet, your hands, the tip of your nose. It's a permanent state of being. You realize the heroic stories of men braving the elements are a lie. You don't brave the cold. You endure it, you survive it, moment by moment. And you know with a cold certainty that one mistake, one moment of inattention, is all it needs to claim you. The highlight of your day, the event around which your entire existence revolves, is dinner. Food is more than sustenance here, it's comfort. It's a morale booster, and most importantly, it's fuel. The amount of energy your body burns just to stay warm is astronomical, and your diet is scientifically calculated to replace those calories. The problem is that science doesn't account for the soul-crushing monotony. Your daily ration on a sledging journey, the diet you will come to know with grim intimacy, is built around three core components: pemmican, biscuits, and tea. That's it. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, pemmican is the cornerstone of polar exploration cuisine. It's a high-energy food invented by Native Americans. The recipe is brutally simple. You take lean meat, dry it, pound it into a powder, and then mix it with an equal amount of pure, rendered fat. Caloric brick that tastes vaguely of tallow and old meat. It's not so much eaten as it is endured. The standard way to prepare it is to chop off a chunk with an axe, drop it into a pot of melted snow, and boil it into a greasy, lumpy stew called hoosh. Hoosh is the lifeblood of the expedition. It's warm, it's fatty, and it's filling, and it's filling, and it's filling. But the taste, it's a taste you will come to associate with pure survival, devoid of any pleasure. Accompanying the hoosh are the biscuits. These are not the crumbly, buttery biscuits you might remember from home. These are dense, hard, unleavened slabs of baked flour and water, designed to withstand years of storage without going bad. They are so hard you risk breaking a tooth if you bite into one directly. The standard practice is to break them up and soak them in your hoosh or your tea, where they turn into a gritty, tasteless mush. You are allotted a precise number of these biscuits per day. You guard them jealously. Losing one in the snow is a small tragedy. And then there is the tea, strong, black, and incredibly sweet. Sugar is energy, so you dump it into your mug with abandon. The warmth of the mug in your frozen hands is sometimes better than the drink itself. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated comfort in a world that offers very little. During the winter in the hut, the diet is slightly more varied. The cook, a man named Thomas Clissold, does his best with what he has. The staples are still pemmican and biscuits, but they are supplemented with canned meats, dried vegetables, and flour for baking bread. The most important addition to the winter diet, however, is fresh meat. To ward off scurvy, the men hunt the local wildlife. You eat seal meat, which is dark, oily, and has a strong, fishy taste that takes some getting used to. And you eat penguin. Penguin breast fried in seal blubber becomes a regular feature on the menu. It tastes, as one of the men famously described it, like a piece of beef, an odoriferous cod fish, and a canvasback duck roasted together in a pot, with a touch of cod liver oil. It's an acquired taste. One of the strangest culinary experiments is the attempt to bake bread. The flour is old and the yeast is unreliable in the cold. The resulting loaves are often dense, sour, and stubbornly refuse to rise properly. But it's bread. The smell of it baking fills the hut, and for a moment, it almost feels like home. It's a small, dense brick of civilization. The problem with this diet, as you will slowly discover, is not just the monotony but its hidden deficiencies. At the time, the science of vitamins was in its infancy. They knew that something in fresh food prevented scurvy, but they didn't know what it was. They called it the anti-ascorbic vitamin. The prevailing theory, which Captain Scott subscribed to, was that scurvy was caused by tainted tinned meat, a form of ptomaine poisoning. He believed that as long as the meat was good quality, scurvy wouldn't be a problem. This was a catastrophic misunderstanding. The real culprit was the lack of vitamin C, a nutrient that is destroyed by drying and prolonged cooking. This leads to one of the most contentious debates surrounding the expedition. Did Scott and his team have a diet that was fundamentally doomed from the start? Amundsen, the Norwegian, was keenly aware of the scurvy risk. He and his men consumed fresh seal meat whenever possible and even ate parts of their sled dogs, knowing that the fresh meat, however unpalatable, contained the vital nutrient. The British team, however, relied far more heavily on their preserved rations. Some historians argue that Scott's team was on a slow, inevitable slide towards malnutrition and scurvy the moment they left the hut. Others contend that the rations, while not ideal, should have been sufficient, and that other factors lead to their decline. Lying in your bunk, you are blissfully unaware of the looming threat of vitamin C deficiency. For you, the problem is more immediate. It's the sheer, mind-numbing repetition. Hoosh, biscuit, tea. Hoosh, biscuit, tea. Hoosh, biscuit, tea. Hoosh, biscuit, tea. Food becomes a mathematical equation of survival, not a source of joy. You start to have vivid, detailed dreams about food. A steak and kidney pie. A fresh, crisp bread with melting butter. You wake up from these dreams with a profound sense of loss. The heroic quest for the pole, you realize, is powered by a greasy, lumpy stew and a desperate craving for a decent meal. It starts quietly. You don't even notice it at first. A general feeling of weariness that you blame on the darkness and the hard labor. Your muscles seem to ache more than usual. You feel irritable, short-tempered. But then you notice the small, telltale signs on your own body. Your gums feel spongy and sore. When you press on them, they bleed a little. You see tiny, pinprick bruises, little purple spots appearing on your legs, even though you haven't bumped into anything. This is the beginning of scurvy. It's not a dramatic, sudden illness. It's a slow, insidious decay from the inside out. It's the disease of a body that is forgetting how to hold itself together. Vitamin C is essential for producing collagen, the protein that acts as the glue for your cells, your skin, your blood vessels. Without it, your body literally begins to fall apart. You see it happening to the other men too. Old scars, long healed, start to ache and turn a strange, purplish color as the tissue breaks down. Men become lethargic, their movements slow and pained. Their joints swell, making every step an effort. The general atmosphere in the hut, already strained, becomes heavier. Tempers fray even more easily. The disease attacks the mind as well as the body, leading to depression and a profound, unshakable melancholy. The expedition's doctors, Wilson and Atkinson, do what they can. They know the cure is fresh food, but their supplies are limited. They dole out the fresh seed and penguin meat, but it's not enough to go around, especially as the winter drags on and the hunting becomes more difficult. They try concocting remedies from the limited medical supplies, but nothing works. They are fighting a ghost they don't fully understand. Scott, clinging to his theory of ptomaine poisoning, is reluctant to admit that his carefully planned rations could be the cause. He sees the lethargy and attributes it to a lack of moral fiber, a failure of the right stuff. You try to hide your symptoms. Admitting to weakness is the ultimate taboo in this environment of stoic masculinity. You pretend your swollen ankles are just from the cold. You force a smile when your gums are throbbing with a dull, constant ache. You are all engaged in a collective deception, each man trying to project an image of strength while secretly terrified of the slow, internal collapse he feels beginning. A particularly bizarre and little-known symptom of advanced scurvy is a strange and morbid sentimentality. Men who were once tough, unsentimental sailors would suddenly burst into tears over a memory of home, or become fixated on a trivial object. It's as if the breakdown of the body's connective tissues is mirrored by a breakdown of emotional control. The carefully constructed walls of stoicism begin to crumble. This leads to one of the most haunting and debated aspects of these expeditions: the psychological toll of chronic, low-level illness combined with sensory deprivation. Was the madness sometimes described in polar explorers a direct result of the disease? Or was it the environment scurvy can lead to neurological symptoms in its final stages, including paranoia and hallucinations? Historians still grapple with this. How do you distinguish between a rational observation, a mind warped by depression, and a brain physically affected by malnutrition, for instance? A man writes in his journal that he feels his companions are plotting against him. Is this a reasonable fear in a high-stress, competitive environment? Is it a symptom of polar ennui, or is it the scurvy talking? The disease ebbs and flows with the availability of fresh meat. After a successful seal hunt, there's a brief period of respite. The men who feast on the fresh, bloody liver, the part richest in vitamin C, feel a temporary surge of energy. Their symptoms recede slightly, but then the fresh meat runs out, and the slow decline begins again. It's a cruel cycle. You live in a state of constant, low-grade pain. Your body feels alien to you, weak and unreliable. The grand ambition of reaching the pole seems absurd when the simple act of getting out of your bunk requires a monumental effort of will. You are no longer a heroic explorer. You are a patient, passively observing the slow, methodical dismantling of your own body. The enemy is not the dramatic, roaring blizzard outside. It's the silent, invisible thief inside your own blood, stealing your strength one cell at a time. You look at the faces of your comrades in the flickering lamplight of the hut. You see the same pallor, the same weary look in their eyes. You are all in the same boat, slowly sinking, and the life raft is made of food you don't have. The tragedy is that the knowledge was almost there. Centuries of naval experience had shown that citrus fruit prevented scurvy. But in the late 1990s, the Royal Navy to switch from Spanish lemons high in vitamin C to West Indian limes much lower in vitamin C, which were then processed in a way that destroyed most of what little vitamin they had. Limmy, the nickname for British sailors, ironically became associated with a less effective treatment. The scientific establishment of the day had, in a sense, unlearned the truth. And you, in a hut at the bottom of the world, are paying the price for that mistake. Your teammates are not all human. A significant part of your hope, your labor, and your emotional energy is invested in the animals, the 19 Manchurian ponies and the 33 Siberian huskies. They are not pets, they are living tools, crucial components of the expedition's machinery, and their suffering is a constant, visible reminder of your own precarious situation. The ponies are Captain Scott's big gamble. He believes their sheer pulling power is superior to dogs for hauling heavy loads across the flat expanse of the barrier ice. They are beautiful, sturdy-looking animals, chosen for their resilience in cold climates. But Antarctica is not just cold, it's an alien environment for a grazing animal. There is no grass. Their entire diet consists of compressed fodder bricks and oats, carried all the way from England. It's a monotonous, unnatural diet, and it's strictly rationed. You are assigned to care for one of them. You name him, perhaps Christopher or Snatcher. You spend hours with him in the makeshift stable built next to the hut. You groom him, his coarse winter coat thick and matted. You feed him his meager rations. You talk to him, a one-sided conversation in the vast, silent darkness. He becomes your confidant. You see the life in his dark, intelligent eyes, and it's a connection to a living, breathing world that you desperately crave. But you also see his slow decline. The extreme cold saps his strength. The ponies are not well adapted to walking on snow and ice. To prevent them from sinking into the soft snow, you are equipped with snowshoes for them, strange, custom-made wooden platforms that you have to strap to their hooves. The ponies hate them. They are awkward and heavy, and the animals stumble constantly. Some of the men believe the snowshoes do more harm than good, exhausting the ponies unnecessarily. This becomes another point of contention, another simmering debate in the hut. Then there are the dogs. They are kept in kennels dug into the snow, each with a small wooden entrance. They are a different breed of animal altogether, half wild, driven by a primal hierarchy. The dog teams are managed by a few of the men, most notably the Russian dog driver, Dmitry Jerovy. The dogs are a whirlwind of energy, yapping, fighting, and constantly testing each other for dominance. They seem much more at home in this environment than the ponies. Their thick fur and high metabolism are perfectly suited to the cold. They can sleep curled up in the snow during a blizzard and emerge hours later, covered in a drift, shaking it off as if it were nothing. Watching them, you can't help but feel a flicker of doubt about Scott's plan. The dogs are fast, tough, and seem to thrive on the challenge. The ponies look sad. They stand listlessly in their stalls, their heads drooping, conserving every ounce of energy. A little-known aspect of managing the dog teams was the constant need to maintain the king dog system. In any pack, one dog establishes itself as the alpha. The driver had to support this king dog, feeding him first and backing him up in fights, because a stable hierarchy meant a stable, obedient team. If the king was challenged and overthrown, the whole team could descend into chaos for days. It was a delicate, brutal piece of animal psychology that the handlers had to master. The fate of these animals is a source of grim, unspoken anxiety. Everyone knows the plan. The ponies will be used for the first, long stage of the journey across the flat ice shelf. They will haul the heavy supplies to the base of the Beardmore Glacier. And then, one by one, as they become too weak to continue, they will be shot. Their meat will be used to feed the men and the dogs on the next leg of the journey. The depots you will rely on for your return journey will be marked not just by a flag, but by a mound of frozen horse meat. This plan is known as motor butchery. It is a cold, pragmatic, and horrifying piece of logistics. The debate about ponies versus dogs is one of the most famous controversies of the heroic age. Was Scott's reliance on ponies a fatal error? Amundsen, the Norwegian, used only dogs. He started with a large number of dogs and systematically killed the weaker ones to feed the stronger ones and the men. It was a ruthless, but effective system. Scott, influenced by his previous Antarctic experience and perhaps a touch of British sentimentality about horses, chose a different path. His mixed strategy of ponies, dogs, and man-hauling was too complex, creating logistical nightmares. The ponies required their own special food to be hauled. They weren't suited to the terrain of the glacier, and their eventual fate casted a psychological shadow over the men who cared for them. You try not to think about it. You focus on the daily routine. You give Christopher his feed, check his hooves, and murmur words of encouragement. You know you are fattening him up for the slaughter. He is carrying the seeds of his own death, and in a way so are you. His reliance on food brought from thousands of miles away mirrors your own. His struggle against an environment he was not made for is your struggle. You see a reflection of your own fragile hope and the cold, calculated price of your ambition. There are days when the world simply ceases to exist beyond the walls of the hut. The wind, which is your constant companion, decides to throw a tantrum. These are not mere snowstorms, they are blizzards of unimaginable ferocity. The Antarctic continent is home to cold but icy winds, where cold, dense air from the high polar plateau is pulled by gravity down to the coast. When a blizzard hits, it is not just snowing, the air itself becomes a solid, moving wall of ice particles and wind. It starts with a low moan, a sound that slowly builds in pitch and volume until it becomes a continuous deafening shriek. The hut, which you once thought so sturdy, groans and shudders under the assault. Fine flour-like snow, called spindrift, is driven with such force that it finds its way through every microscopic crack in the walls and window frames. A fine, white powder begins to coat everything inside the hut, a constant reminder of the fury outside. You are trapped. All outdoor work stops. It is impossible to even see your hand in front of your face. Stepping outside would be suicide. A man could get lost and freeze to death within 10 feet of the hut's door. The stories of other expeditions are filled with cautionary tales of men who stepped out for a moment and were never seen again. You are under house arrest, and the jailer is the wind. These periods of confinement, which can last for days on end, are a severe test of your psychological endurance. The claustrophobia, already a low-level hum in your daily life, becomes acute. The 25 men in the hut are suddenly too many. The space is too small. Every cough, every repeated phrase from a companion grates on your nerves with an intensity that is physically painful. The carefully constructed social order begins to fray at the edges. To pass the time, you play cards. You read the same books over and over from the small expedition library. You mend your gear with meticulous, almost obsessive care, stitching stitching a seam that is already perfectly fine. You are just trying to keep your hands and mind busy, to stop yourself from staring at the wall, listening to the incessant, maddening scream of the wind. The scientific work continues, but even that is affected. The meteorologist's duty to check the outdoor instruments becomes a life-threatening ordeal. To make the journey, he and an assistant must dress as if for a polar trek. They tie a rope to the door of the hut, and the other end to the instrument screen. They then crawl on their hands and knees, following the rope, blinded by the driving snow, the wind trying to rip them from their lifeline. It is a journey of perhaps 50 yards, but it is as perilous as crossing a mountain range. When they stumble back inside, their clothes are caked in ice, their faces raw, their eyes wide with the sheer, primal violence of what they have just experienced. A little-known meteorological phenomenon they were studying was the exact nature of the snow crystals. The scientists would catch the flakes on black felt boards to observe their structure. They discovered that in the extreme cold of the Antarctic interior, the snow crystals were not the beautiful, complex dendrites you see in pictures. Instead, they were simple, hard, hexagonal plates or needles. This type of snow, when driven by the wind, acts like fine-grained sand, a powerful abrasive that can erode ice and even rock over time. The blizzard is not just burying you, it's trying to sand you down to nothing. The psychological impact of being stormbound is a subject of ongoing debate among polar historians. Some argue that these periods were actually beneficial for camaraderie, forcing the men to rely on each other for entertainment and support, strengthening their bonds. They point to the sing-alongs, the card games, the shared sense of being in it together. But other historians, analyzing private diaries, suggest a much darker reality. They argue these periods of intense, forced proximity exacerbated tensions, fueled paranoia, and led to a significant decline in mental health. The hut became a pressure cooker. Men would retreat into a sullen, brooding silence for days, communicating only in grunts. Minor disagreements could escalate into glowering, unspoken feuds that would last for weeks. You experience both. There are moments of genuine connection, a shared joke that breaks the tension, a quiet act of kindness from a bunkmate. But there are also long hours where the sheer presence of the other man feels like a physical weight. You crave solitude with a desperate, burning intensity, but there is nowhere to go. You close your eyes and try to transport yourself back home, to a quiet room, a walk in the woods, anywhere but here. But the shriek of the wind always pulls you back. When the blizzard finally ends, the silence that follows is as shocking as the noise was. You crack open the door and are met with a wall of snow. The hut is buried, sometimes up to the roof. You have to dig your way out, tunneling up to the new surface of the world. When you emerge, the landscape is transformed. It's smooth, white, and pristine. All the tracks, all the rubbish, all the tracks, all the rubbish, all the signs of your presence have been wiped clean, erased by the storm. It's a beautiful and humbling sight. The continent has flexed its power and reminded you once again that your existence here is temporary and utterly insignificant. You are just a fleeting scratch on an immense, unblemished surface. The long dark winter does more than just chill your bones, it starts to play tricks on your mind. You are living in a state of profound sensory deprivation. For months your world has been a palette of black, white, and grey. The only colors are the artificial ones inside the hut and the ghostly, shifting greens and purples of the aurora australis. The landscape is monotonous. The silence when the wind isn't howling is absolute. Your brain, starved of new information, starts to create its own. You begin to hear things. In the dead of night, lying in your bunk, you hear a faint, distant sound like church bells. You know it's impossible. You are thousands of miles from the nearest church. You tell yourself it's just the ice groaning or the wind playing a trick on the stovepipe. But the sound is so clear, so specific. You don't mention it to anyone, for fear they'll think you're going mad. But then, a few days later, another man casually asks, "Did anyone else hear that strange ringing last night?" A cold wave of relief and terror washes over you. You are not the only one. These auditory hallucinations are a common, though rarely discussed, feature of polar life. Another is the sensation of presence. When you are out alone, perhaps checking on the polies or fetching ice, you get the distinct, unshakable feeling that someone is standing just behind you, just out of your line of sight. You whip your head around, your heart pounding, but there is nothing there. Just the endless empty snowstack. It's a primal, deeply unsettling feeling, the brain's response to profound isolation. Visual tricks are common too. In the perpetual twilight, shadows move and take on shapes. A rock outcrop in the distance can look, for a fleeting moment, like a human figure. A drift of snow can resemble a tent. You find yourself staring into the gloom, trying to make sense of shapes that refuse to resolve, your mind desperately trying to populate the emptiness with something familiar. One of the most peculiar psychological phenomena documented on these expeditions is what became known as Antarctic stare. You see it in the other men. They will sit for hours motionless, just staring into the middle distance, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. Their eyes unfocused. They are not asleep, but they are not fully present either. It's a form of mental retreat, a way for the mind to escape the suffocating confines of the hut in the overwhelming emptiness of the landscape. It's a coping mechanism, but a disturbing one to witness. It looks like the lights are on but nobody's home. A strange hobby that some men take up is memorization. They will take a page from a book of poetry or a scientific manual and spend days, even weeks, committing it to memory word for word. It's a way to impose order on a chaotic internal world, a mental exercise to prove that their brains are still functioning properly. One man memorizes the entire lineage of the kings of England. Another learns vast swaths of Milton's Paradise Lost. It is a bizarre, impressive, and deeply sad spectacle of minds turning inward for lack of any external world to conquer. This mental deterioration is one of the most difficult aspects of the expedition for historians to assess. The official logs and published accounts speak of high morale and purposeful activity, but the private diaries, the uncensored thoughts of the men, tell a different story. They are filled with passages of despair, paranoia, and a profound sense of dislocation. The debate continues: was the leadership aware of the full extent of this psychological decay? Did they see it as a medical problem, or a moral failing? Scott, a product of the rigid, emotionally suppressed Victorian naval tradition, was more likely to see it as the latter. A man struggling with depression was not ill, he was lacking in character. This attitude, while typical of the era, likely prevented men from seeking help or even admitting to themselves that they were struggling. You too, write in your diary. It becomes your only true confidant. In its pages, you can admit the fear, the loneliness, the strange tricks your mind is playing on you. You write about the phantom bells. You describe the feeling of being watched by an unseen presence. Writing it down makes it feel more real, and yet somehow more manageable. It's a way of externalizing the ghosts, of drawing a line between what is real and what your starved senses are inventing. The line, however, becomes increasingly blurred. You have a vivid dream that you are walking through a bustling London market, the air filled with the smell of fruit and baking bread. You wake up, and for a few disorienting seconds, the dream feels more real than the cold, dark, silent hut. The memory of a sunlit street is more tangible than the frozen bunk you are lying in. You are becoming unmoored from reality, drifting in a sea of darkness and memory. The ghosts of the world you left behind are becoming more solid than the world you now inhabit. And the scariest part is, you are not sure you want to send them away. They are, at least, company. In this tiny, isolated world, the most dangerous predator isn't the cold or wind. It's the man sleeping in the bunk next to you. The intense, forced intimacy of the hut means that there is no escape from your companions. Every personality quirk, every annoying habit is magnified 1,000 times by the darkness and confinement. The battle for survival becomes, in part, a battle to tolerate each other. You learn to identify men by their sounds. The way one man clears his throat before speaking. The loud, wet slurp of another drinking his tea. The relentless off-key whistling of a third as he mends his socks. These sounds, once trivial, become sources of profound, almost violent irritation. You find yourself clenching your jaw, digging your fingernails into your palms, just to keep from shouting, "For God's sake, stop it." The social hierarchy, so clear and rigid at the start, begins to show cracks. The division between the officers in the wardroom and the men on the mess deck is a source of constant, low-level resentment. They live on one side of a thin wooden wall, you on the other. You can hear their laughter, the clink of their glasses, the murmur of their conversations. They have more space, better lighting, and small luxuries that you are denied. They eat their meals off china plates, you eat yours from a tin bowl. It's a small thing, but in this world of deprivation, small things become enormous. You start to feel less like a valued member of an elite team and more like a servant, a hired hand. This tension is a subject of much debate among historians who study the expedition's social dynamics. Was Scott's insistence on maintaining a strict naval class structure in a civilian scientific expedition a vital tool for discipline, or a disastrous social blunder? Critics argue that it fostered an us versus them mentality, hindering the free flow of ideas and creating a toxic undercurrent of resentment that sapped morale. Supporters contend that it was the only way to manage a large group of disparate men under extreme stress, providing a familiar and predictable social order. Then there are the individual conflicts. Two men who were perhaps friends at the start of the journey develop a silent, smoldering hatred for each other over a perceived insult or a dispute about a shared chore. They stop speaking. They refuse to look at each other. The entire hut becomes aware of the feud, the air thick with their unspoken animosity. You learn to navigate around these human minefields, careful not to take sides, not to get drawn into the drama. A particularly strange and little-known source of conflict was personal hygiene, or the lack thereof. In an environment where washing was a rare and unpleasant ordeal, some men simply gave up. They would go for weeks without even a cursory wash, their clothes and bodies emitting a powerful pungent odor. In the close quarters of the hut, this was not just unpleasant, it was an invasion of personal space, a sign of disrespect for the other men. Arguments would break out, not about matters of life and death, but about whose turn it was to sit downwind of a particularly fragrant individual. You find your own ways to cope. You retreat into yourself. You find a corner of the hut that you can claim, however temporarily, as your own. You learn the art of being alone in a crowd, of creating a mental bubble of privacy. Your diary becomes more important than ever, a place to vent the frustrations you dare not speak aloud. You write pages of angry, petty complaints about your companions, only to feel a sense of shame and guilt afterward. You are all in this together. You remind yourself you must be better than this. But the irritation always returns. The most dangerous conflicts are the ones that involve the core mission. Disagreements about strategy, which were once polite debates, become more heated. One faction believes the ponies are being overworked. Another thinks the deeper laying parties are not pushing far enough, not leaving enough supplies. A quiet, insidious blame game begins to take root, long before any real crisis has occurred. Men start to form cliques, whispering in corners, second-guessing the decisions of the leadership. You overhear a conversation between two of the more experienced men. They are questioning Scott's plan to have the final polar party rely on man-hauling pulling the sledges themselves after the last pony is gone. They talk about Shackleton's near-fatal experience with man-hauling on a previous expedition. They murmur that it's an inefficient, exhausting, and borderline suicidal strategy. They wonder if Scott's obsession with the nobility of human effort is blinding him to the practical realities. This quiet conversation is a seed of doubt, and it finds fertile ground in the anxious, stressed minds of the men. You start to wonder too. Are you following a brilliant leader, or a stubborn man marching towards a predictable disaster? The hut, which was supposed to be your sanctuary, is starting to feel like a trap, not just because of the cold outside, but because of the crumbling trust within. The greatest threat to your survival may not be a sudden crevasse or a fatal frostbite, but the slow, corrosive poison of human conflict. After 120 days of perpetual night it returns. The change is subtle at first. A faint, pearlescent glow begins to appear on the northern horizon during what passes for midday. For weeks it's just a promise, or watercolor wash of pale light that lasts for an hour or two before fading back to black. That it's enough. A palpable shift in energy ripples through the hut. The deep, soul-crushing lethargy of the winter begins to lift. Men who have been sullen and withdrawn for months start to crack smiles. The Antarctic stare begins to recede from their eyes. Then, one day in late August, it happens. You all gather outside, just as you did for months earlier. You stare intently at the horizon, your eyes shielded by snow goggles. And then you see it. A tiny, brilliant flash of orange, the upper limb of the sun, peeking over the edge of the world for just a few moments before disappearing again. A ragged, spontaneous cheer erupts from the men. Some men weep openly, tears freezing on their cheeks. The sun is back. The long dark night is over. You have survived the winter. The return of the light is like a physical resurrection. The world is reborn in sharp detail and brilliant color. The black volcanic rock of Cape Evans stands out in stark relief against the dazzling white of the snow. The ice of the frozen sea glitters with a million points of light. The sky is a deep, impossible blue. You feel your spirit soaring. The psychological weight you've been carrying for months dissolves in the brilliant, clean light. The work of the expedition kicks into high gear. The period of hibernation is over. Now the great southern journey to the pole can be prepared in earnest. The hut is a hive of activity. Sledges are brought out, their runners polished and repaired, harnesses are checked. Food rations are meticulously weighed and packed into canvas bags, each one calculated to provide a specific number of calories for a specific number of men for a specific number of days. It is a vast and complex logistical puzzle. The animals, too, seem revitalized by the sun. The ponies are brought out of their gloomy stable to stand in the sunlight, their coats looking shaggy and worn. The dogs who have been listless and bored are suddenly filled with manic energy, yapping and howling, eager to run. You begin to take the pony teams and dog teams on short trial runs, hardening your muscles and theirs for the ordeal to come. It feels good to be moving, to be working with purpose, to feel the crisp air in your lungs and the sun on your face, however weak its warmth may be. A strange and beautiful phenomenon you witness is the effect of the new light on the ice. As the sun's rays strike the sea ice, they are refracted and scattered, creating incredible optical effects. Sun dogs or mock suns appear in the sky, bright, rainbow-colored spots on either side of the real sun. Halos of light encircle it. The air seems filled with glittering diamond dust, tiny ice crystals that hang in the air and catch the light. The continent, which was so menacing in the darkness, now reveals a breathtaking, crystalline beauty. But the return of the sun is not just a cause for celebration. It is a starting gun. The race for the pole is now on in earnest. Somewhere, on the other side of the Ross ice shelf, the Norwegian team led by Roald Amundsen is also seeing this sun. They have also survived their winter. And you know they are also preparing to set out. A new kind of anxiety settles over the camp, the anxiety of competition. Every day of preparation feels. Scott is methodical, some would say to a fault. He insists on waiting for the temperatures to rise further, to spare the ponies the worst of the cold. But some of the men are restless. They look towards the south, imagining Amundsen already on his way. This decision of when to start is one of the most heavily debated aspects of the entire expedition. Did Scott wait too long? Amundsen, with his hardier dogs, was able to set out significantly earlier in the season. Scott's concern for his ponies meant he started later, giving him a shorter window of good weather for the return journey. Was this a prudent act of animal husbandry, or a critical strategic error that cost him valuable time? Historians fall on both sides. Some argue that starting earlier would have been suicide for the ponies and that Scott made the only reasonable choice. Others maintain that in a race you must take calculated risks, and Scott's caution was his undoing. For you, the strategic debates are background noise. Your reality is the physical work. You are stronger now, your body hardened by the winter's labor. The scurvy has receded thanks to a final feast of fresh seal meat before the seals disappeared for the season. You feel a sense of optimism, of purpose. The grand adventure, the reason you traveled halfway around the world, is finally about to begin. The dark, claustrophobic, psychological struggles of the winter feel like a bad dream. The future is a straight line south, across a blank map, towards a single point on the globe. The sun is up. It's time to go. The day finally comes. You stand at the starting line, a chaotic jumble of men, ponies, dogs, and heavily laden sledges. A final photograph is taken. You force a confident smile, but your stomach is a knot of anxiety and excitement. The order is given. And with a lurch and a shout, the great southern journey begins. The first phase of the journey is across the Great Ice Barrier, now known as the Ross Ice Shelf. It is the largest single floating piece of ice in the world, roughly the size of France. Your task is to cross hundreds of miles of this flat, featureless expanse to reach the foot of the Beardmore Glacier, the gateway to the High Polar Plateau. The work is brutal, monotonous, and mind-numbingly repetitive. Your life shrinks to the simplest of rhythms. You wake in a frozen tent. You force down a breakfast of hot hoosh and a hard biscuit. You pack up the camp, a miserable process of wrestling with frozen canvas and stiff ropes with numb fingers. Then, you lean into your harness and pull. For 8 to 10 hours a day you pull, man-hauling. You quickly learn is a special kind of torture. You wear a canvas harness that loops over your shoulders and around your waist. You and 2 or 3 other men are roped to a sledge that weighs for 500 pounds. You lean forward, digging your boots into the snow, and you just walk, step after agonizing step. The landscape never changes. It is a perfectly flat, white desert stretching to an empty horizon. There are no landmarks, no trees, no rocks. The only sign of progress is the slow, crawling movement of the team ahead of you and the dwindling distance on the sledge meter. a device like an odometer attached to one of the sledges. The ponies are having a terrible time. The surface, which looks smooth from a distance, is often composed of soft, druggy, hard, wind-blown ridges of snow, like a frozen, choppy sea. The ponies stumble constantly, their hooves punching through the crust. They sweat profusely despite the cold, and the sweat freezes on their coats, matting the fur into clumps of ice. They are visibly weakening, and you know their days are numbered. Every evening, you feed your pony his ration, stroke his neck, and feel a growing sense of dread. The dogs, by contrast, seem to be in their element. They pull their sledges with a frantic, joyful energy, their tongues lolling out. They are faster than the pony teams and the man-haulers, so their daily routine is different. They run ahead, establish the next camp, and are oft uncurled up asleep by the time the rest of you stumble in, exhausted. This difference in pace creates a logistical headache and a subtle friction between the teams. A particularly grim and little-known detail of the sledging routine is the night watch. In a tent with 4 men, one man had to stay awake for a 2-hour shift to monitor the primus stove while the dinner hoosh was cooking. The risk of fire from the volatile stove, or carbon monoxide poisoning in the enclosed tent, was too great to leave it unattended. This meant that every 4th night, your precious sleep was cut short by 2 hours. You would sit in the flickering candlelight, listening to the breathing of the other men, your mind a numb void, just watching a pot boil. It was a small, but significant, drain on your already depleted energy reserves. The diet is now the strict, unvarying sledging ration. Hoosh, biscuits, tea. The highlight of the week is pemmican day, when you get a slightly larger ration, or a biscuit day with an extra biscuit. You become obsessed with food. You plan in excruciating detail the magnificent feasts you will have when you get back to civilization. One of the men in your tent has a small, tattered cookbook that he reads aloud every night. Like scripture, the descriptions of roasted chicken and apple pie are a form of exquisite torture. The historical debate here centers on the efficiency of this multifaceted approach. Scott's motor party, with the experimental tractors, had set out first, but the machines quickly broke down in the extreme cold and had to be abandoned. Now you had the dog teams, the pony teams, and the man-hauling teams all moving at different speeds, with different requirements. Amundsen's approach was brutally simple: a single type of transport dogs, moving as one cohesive unit. Critics argue that Scott's plan was overly complex and inefficient, a logistical nightmare from the start. Supporters argue that it provided redundancy. If one system failed, the others could continue. But as you trudge along hauling your sledge, watching the ponies struggle and the dog teams disappear over the horizon, it doesn't feel redundant. It feels fragmented and slow. You are not making good time. The surfaces are worse than expected. The ponies are fading faster than planned. The days are a blur of white snow, grey sky, and the burning ache in your shoulders and legs. The heroic dream of planting a flag at the pole feels very far away. Right now your entire ambition has shrunk to a single, desperate goal: reaching the small, dirty, crowded tent that is waiting for you somewhere out there in the vast white emptiness. Out here on the barrier, the world is a blank canvas. The horizon is a perfect and broken circle. The sky is often a uniform milky white, a condition known as a whiteout. In a whiteout, the light is so diffuse that it casts no shadows. You lose all sense of depth and perspective. The ground and the sky blend into one. You can't tell if a dark spot in the distance is a small rock a few feet away or a huge mountain miles away. Walking becomes a disorienting, nauseating experience. You stumble over ridges you didn't see, and you brace for impacts that never come. It feels like walking on the inside of a ping-pong ball. Navigation becomes an act of faith, a desperate reliance on fragile instruments and abstract numbers. Your primary tool is the sun, when you can see it. At midday, one of the officers, usually Captain Scott or Teddy Evans, will use a theodolite to measure the altitude of the sun. This, combined with the time from their chronometer, allows them to calculate their latitude. It's a painstaking process. The officer has to take off his outer mitts to adjust the delicate knobs of the instrument, his fingers quickly going numb. He squints through the eyepiece, his breath freezing on the metal. The rest of you stand by, shivering, waiting for the verdict. Are we where we think we are? When the sun is hidden, you rely on the magnetic compass. But even that is treacherous. You are so close to the magnetic South Pole that the compass needle is sluggish and unreliable, desperately trying to point straight down into the ice. To keep a straight course while marching, you learn to navigate by the wind, if it's blowing steadily, or by the direction of the Sostrug. The wind carve ridges in the snow, but the wind can shift, and the Sostrug can curve, leading you slowly imperceptibly. Of course, the most basic method, and the one you use most often, is simply to follow the tracks of the team in front of you. But in a blizzard, these tracks can be wiped out in minutes, leaving you utterly blind. The fear of getting separated from the group is a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. A strange and little-known navigational challenge was the shimmer. On clear, cold days, a layer of super-chilled air near the surface of the snow would create intense thermal distortions. The horizon would wobble and dance. Distant objects, like the team ahead of you, would appear to float in the air or be stretched into bizarre, elongated shapes. These mirages were not just disorienting, they made it almost impossible to get an accurate reading with the theodolite. The navigator retreating with the theodolite, patiently for a moment of atmospheric stillness that might never come. The responsibility for navigation weighs heavily on the officers. A single small error in calculation, a misread compass, could send you miles off course. In this landscape, being 5 miles off course from a supplied depot is a death sentence. You would march right past it, never knowing it was there, and slowly starve to in the wilderness. Every navigational decision is a matter of life and death. This brings up a subtle historical debate about the culture of the expedition. The navigational work was the exclusive domain of the Royal Navy officers. The other members of the team, including the scientists, were expected to simply follow, to trust implicitly in the officers' skills. While the naval officers were superbly trained in open ocean navigation, some historians question if this rigid hierarchy was best suited for land-based polar exploration. Did it prevent other capable men from contributing or double-checking the work in Amundsen's more egalitarian team? Several members were skilled navigators, providing a system of checks and balances. Here, the fate of the entire party rests on the shoulders of one or two men. You place your trust in them completely. You have to. You have no choice. Your job is to put one foot in front of the other. You stare at the back of the man in front of you, the rhythmic swing of his arms, the plodding gait of his legs. This becomes your entire world. You fall into a trance-like state, your mind shutting down, focusing only on the rhythm of the march. Step, breathe. Step, breathe. Sometimes, to break the monotony, you try to let your mind wander. You rebuild your childhood home in your memory, brick by brick. You try to recall the plot of a book you once read. But the landscape always pulls you back. Its sheer, overwhelming emptiness demands your attention. It's a void that seems to suck the thoughts right out of your head, leaving only the cold, the ache, and the endless, crushing whiteness, crawling across an enormous empty page, and your only hope is that the man with the map knows where he is going. The flat, monotonous surface of the barrier lulls you into a false sense of security. You start to think the main danger is just the cold and the exhaustion. Then you enter the zone of crevices. The Beardmore Glacier, your gateway to the polar plateau, is a colossal river of ice, flowing slowly down from the mountains. They are insidious. Often they are covered by a thin, fragile bridge of wind-blown snow, making them completely invisible from the surface. You can be walking on what looks like solid ground, and a second later, you are falling into a bottomless, blue-green abyss. The lead man in each sledge team has the terrifying job of probing. He walks ahead, constantly jabbing the snow in front of him with his long ice axe or a bamboo pole, feeling for the telltale hollow space that signals a hidden crevasse. It's a nerve-wracking, high-stakes game of blind man's bluff. One day it happens. The man in front of you suddenly disappears. There is no warning. One moment he is there. The next, there is just a hole in the snow in the taut line of the sledge harness leading down into it. The sledge, which you have been cursing for its weight, is now your anchor, your salvation. It digs into the snow, holding fast. The man is dangling from his harness, spinning slowly in the darkness, 100 feet down. Panic gives way to practice drill. You and the other men dig your boots in, anchoring the sledge. You shout down into the hole. A faint, muffled reply comes back. HES alive. You work frantically, your fingers clumsy with cold and adrenaline, to set up a rope system. You drop a line down to him. He manages to tie it around himself. Then you all pull, hand over hand, your muscles screaming, hauling his dead weight up out of the depths. When he finally emerges, covered in snow, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a terror you can't even imagine, you all stand in silence for a moment. You have just looked into the jaws of death. The inside of a crevasse, as described by those who have fallen in and survived, is an otherworldly place. The light that filters down from above turns the ice walls a beautiful, terrifying deep blue. The silence is absolute. It is a place of profound, frozen beauty and instant death. A little-known fact about these crevices is that they breathe. As the atmospheric pressure changes, air is forced in and out of the vast network of cracks, creating faint, moaning sounds that seem to come from the ice itself. At night, lying in your tent, you can sometimes hear these low, ghostly groans, a reminder of the unstable, hollow ground beneath you. The ponies are particularly vulnerable. Their weight is too much for most snow bridges. One of the ponies, named Jeho, falls into a crevasse. He is wedged tightly, his terrified WH in noise echoing up from the blue depths. There is nothing you can do. You can't haul a 1,000-pound animal out of a deep ice chasm. After a brief, grim discussion, Captain Scott gives the order. One of the men takes a rifle, lies on the edge of the crevasse, and puts the poor animal out of its misery. The sound of the shot is shockingly loud in the silence. It's a moment of profound failure and loss. Another piece of your machinery, another life you were responsible for is gone. The presence of crevices dictates your every move. You learn to read the subtle signs on the snow's surface, faint, sagging lines or subtle changes in texture that might hint at a void below. You travel roped together at all times, maintaining a specific distance between each man, so that if one falls, the others can anchor him. This safety measure, however, creates its own problems. The rope is a constant, annoying tether. It gets tangled. It means you can never truly walk at your own pace. You are tied to the fate of the men in front of and behind you. This constant, life-or-death tension adds another layer of psychological stress to the journey. You can't let your mind wander. You can't fall into the marching trance that helped you survive the monotony of the barrier. You must be hyper-vigilant every single second of the day. Your eyes scan the snow ahead. Your eyes scan the snow ahead. Your ears are pricked for the dreaded, soft warm sound of a collapsing snow bridge. The historical debate here is a technical one, focused on the equipment. Were the sledges designed correctly for crevasse country? Were the ropes and harnesses strong enough? Some modern polar explorers have suggested that their equipment was barely adequate, and that they survived more through luck than through good planning. Others argue that, given the materials available at the time, their system was as good as it could be, a testament to their ingenuity. As you stand on the edge of that dark blue hole, having just pulled your teammate back into the world of the living, you don't care about the debate. You are just profoundly, terrifyingly aware that the ground you thought was solid is, in fact, a fragile, treacherous illusion. The continent is not just trying to freeze you or starve you. It is actively trying to swallow you whole. You have reached the base of the Beardmore Glacier. The flat, white world of the ice shelf is behind you. Ahead of you is a monstrous, frozen waterfall, a chaotic jumble of ice falls, pressure ridges, and crevasse fields, stretching over 100 miles long and climbing 10,000 feet to the polar plateau. This is the Great Wall, and you must climb it. This is also the point of no return, a concept that is both a mathematical calculation and a psychological precipice. The depot-laying parties that came before you have left caches of food and fuel at specific, pre-planned latitudes. Your entire survival strategy is based on reaching these depots, both on the way up and, more importantly, on the way back down. The plan is a delicate equation of calories burned versus calories available. The point of no return is the moment when you have consumed more food than you have left in the depots behind you. It's the moment when, Mathematically, turning back his navel is to push forward, to reach the pole, and then to successfully find every single one of the depots on the return journey. There is no margin for error. Before you begin the ascent of the glacier, the last of the ponies are shot. It's a grim, methodical business. The animals are weak, exhausted, their purpose served. You lead your pony, your silent confidant for the past months, to a designated spot. You give him a final pat. You don't watch as the rifle is raised. The sharp crack of the shot echoes through the silent mountains. You feel a profound and hollow sadness. It's a necessary act, you tell yourself. Their meat will feed you and the dogs, but it feels like a betrayal. A large depot, which will be called Shambles Camp, is created here, a gruesome larder of frozen horse meat. Now the support parties begin to turn back. Scott selects the final polar party, the men who will make the last dash for the pole. You watch as your companions, men you have shared a tent with, men you have struggled alongside for months, wave a brief farewell and begin their long journey back to the coast. A part of you envies them. Their ordeal is heading towards its end. Yours is entering its most dangerous phase. But a larger part of you is consumed by a fierce, burning ambition. You are going for the prize. As you begin the ascent, the work becomes exponentially harder. Man-hauling a heavy sledge up a steep, icy incline is a nightmare. You are often on all fours, scrambling up slopes, your boots scrabbling for purchase on the slick ice. The sledges slide backward, threatening to pull you down with them. The air is getting thinner as you gain altitude, and you find yourself gasping for breath, your lungs burning. A little-known challenge of the Beardmore Glacier is the geology. It's not a smooth ramp of ice. The glacier flows around and over huge rock formations, or nunatakes, that stick up through the ice. This means you are constantly navigating through chaotic ice falls and pressure ridges, where the ice is buckled and shuttered into a maze of giant, unstable blocks. The sledges have to be relayed, meaning you haul one sledge up a particularly bad section, leave it, go back down, and then haul the second one up. It is brutally slow and exhausting work, doubling the distance you have to travel. It is here that one of the expedition's key scientific discoveries is made. One of the geologists in the party, Frank Debenham, who turned back at the top of the glacier, spots something dark in the strata of a rock face. He scrambles over and finds the fossilized remains of a plant. This is a landmark discovery. Finding a fossil of a temperate climate plant in Antarctica is concrete proof that this frozen continent was once warm and part of a great supercontinent, Gondwana. It's a piece of evidence that will later be crucial to the theory of continental drift. Even in the midst of this desperate struggle for survival, the men take the time to collect 35 pounds of these rock samples, adding the extra weight to their already overloaded sledges. This decision is the subject of a fierce and poignant historical debate. Was it an act of incredible scientific dedication or a foolish, fatal burden, those 35 pounds of extra weight that had to be hauled every agonizing step of the way back? Did that extra weight contribute to their exhaustion and slow their return, costing them precious time and energy, or was it the ultimate justification for the entire expedition, proving that it was about more than just a race? The men chose the science. They chose to haul the rocks. You are now truly in an alien world. The landscape is majestic and terrifying. You are a tiny speck crawling through a frozen, shattered kingdom. The sun, when it's out, is broken only by the scrape of the sledge runners, the crunch of your boots, and the occasional, thunderous crash of an ice avalanche from the mountains high above you. You are beyond the point of no return. You are beyond the point of no return. The only way is up. The pole feels closer, but home has never felt so far away. You are on the polar plateau. You have conquered the Beardmore Glacier and now stand at the top of the world. It is not a triumphant peak, but a vast, empty, high-altitude desert of snow. The plateau is at an average elevation of 10,000 feet. The air is dangerously thin. The temperature, even in the 24-hour-a-day summer sun, rarely rises above -30 degrees Celsius. This is the coldest, driest, and highest desert on Earth. The final support party, the dog teams, has turned back, leaving you and the 4 other men of the polar party to complete the journey alone. It is just the 5 of you, and 2 sledges, which you must now pull yourselves. The relief of no longer having to care for the animals is quickly replaced by the grim reality of the increased workload. The man hauling is now a permanent state of being. And you are starving. Slowly, methodically, and undeniably starving. The sledging rations, so carefully calculated back in the warmth of the hut, are proving to be insufficient. The scientific understanding of metabolism in extreme cold and at high altitude was in its infancy. The planners had underestimated the sheer number of calories your bodies would burn. You are running on a calorie deficit, and you have been for weeks. Your body is consuming itself to stay alive. You lose weight at an alarming rate. The layers of clothing that were snug at the start of the journey now hang loosely on your frame. You can see the bones in your companions' faces becoming more prominent, their eyes sinking deeper into their sockets. You are becoming walking skeletons. The hunger is a physical presence, a constant gnawing ache in your stomach. But it's more than that. It's a psychological obsession. Your entire consciousness narrows until it is focused on one thing: the next meal. You live from hoosh to hoosh. The hours of marching are just the price you pay for the brief, greasy warmth of the pemmican stew. You become pathologically protective of your food. You scrape every last molecule of hoosh from your bowl. If you drop a crumb of biscuit in the snow, you will spend frantic minutes searching for it. You watch your companions with a hawk-like intensity as the rations are divided, ensuring that you get your exact fair share. A strange, primal paranoia begins to set in. A little-known but devastating factor in your starvation was a simple, mundane problem: faulty fuel cans. The tins of kerosene used for the primer stoves had been sealed with leather washers. In the extreme cold, the washers shrank and the solder on the seams cracked. This allowed a significant amount of fuel to evaporate during the months they were left in the depots. This meant you often didn't have enough fuel to melt as much snow as you needed for drinking water, leading to chronic dehydration. More importantly, it meant you couldn't cook your food for as long as you should. The hoosh was often barely lukewarm, and the biscuits couldn't be properly soaked. Your body had to expend precious extra energy just to melt and digest the semi-frozen food in your stomach. You were being robbed of calories by a faulty washer. This fuel evaporation issue is a key point in the historical analysis of the expedition's failure. Was it a simple, unforeseeable accident of technology, or was it a sign of poor planning and inadequate equipment testing? Some historians argue it was a critical flaw that cascaded through their entire survival system, contributing to dehydration, malnutrition, and frostbite as they couldn't warm themselves properly. Others see it as just one of many misfortunes that befell the team. The physical effects of starvation and dehydration are brutal. Your ability to heal is compromised. A small cut or a blister that would normally heal in a few days now festers, refusing to close. Your tolerance for cold plummets. Without the internal furnace of a well-fed body, the cold seeps into your core, a deep, unshakable chill that no amount of clothing can ward off. And then there is the frostbite. Your fingers and toes, already at risk, are now constantly numb. The circulation to your extremities is one of the first things your starving body sacrifices to keep your core warm. One of the men, Petty Officer Edgar Evans, a big, strong man once thought to be the workhorse of the group, is suffering badly. A cut on his hand is not healing, and his fingers and nose are repeatedly frostbitten. He is becoming slower, more clumsy. He is the first crack in the team's facade of invincibility. You march in silence. There is no energy for conversation. All your will is focused on the simple, mechanical act of putting one foot in front of the other. The dream of glory, of being first, is still there, but it's a distant, abstract concept. Your immediate reality is the gnawing hunger, the burning in your lungs, and the dead, white emptiness of the plateau. You are walking a tightrope, and the rope is getting thinner with every step. You are just a few miles from the pole. After more than 2 months of brutal, relentless travel, the goal is within your grasp. A strange, almost manic energy takes hold of the group. The exhaustion and hunger are momentarily forgotten, replaced by a feverish anticipation. You are about to become the first human beings to stand at the southernmost point of the planet. Your names will be etched into history forever. One of the men, Birdie Bowers, with his sharp eyesight, is scanning the horizon. He suddenly stops. He points. What's that? You all stop. You squint, your snow-goggled eyes straining to see. There is a dark speck in the distance. It's too small, too regular to be a saw-struck eye or a rock. As you march closer, your heart pounding with a dreadful, sickening premonition, the speck resolves into a shape. It's a flag, a black flag, flapping forlornly in the polar wind. Next to it, the faint outline of a tent. You have been beaten. The feeling is indescribable. It is not anger. It is not disappointment. It is a hollow, crushing emptiness, a void that seems to suck all the strength from your limbs, all the air from your lungs. The immense physical and mental effort of the past months, the suffering, the frostbite, the hunger, the loss of the ponies, all of it, for nothing. You have endured a living hell to arrive at second place. You trudge the final few hundred yards to the Norwegian camp like men walking to their own execution. The tent is empty, but well ordered. Inside, there is a letter, left by Roald Amundsen, addressed to Captain Scott. There is also a note for Amundsen to deliver to the King of Norway, a request Scott is meant to fulfill in the unlikely event Amundsen's party perishes on their return journey. It is a polite, almost gentlemanly gesture, but it feels like a twisting of the knife. Amundsen's party has been here. They have succeeded, and they have been gone for over a month. Scott's diary entry for that day is one of the most famous in the annals of exploration the pole. Yes, but under very different circumstances from those expected. Great God, this is an awful place and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority. You look around at the faces of your companions. The brief flicker of triumph is gone, replaced by a profound, soul-weary despair. You have reached the goal, but the prize was stolen before you even arrived. The destination was the point of the whole journey, the fuel for your ambition. Now, it is just a geographical location, a desolate, meaningless spot in an endless desert of snow, and you still have to walk 900 miles back. A little-known detail from Amundsen's camp was the presence of a few discarded items, including a reindeer skin mitten, the sexton part. These small signs of another human presence, in this most inhuman of places, were profoundly jarring. It was like finding a footprint on the moon. For months, you have been the only humans in this world. Now, you are confronted with the undeniable proof that you were not. The historical debate surrounding this moment is immense. Why did Amundsen succeed where Scott failed? Was it the dogs versus the ponies? Was it Amundsen's meticulous, almost obsessive planning versus Scott's more complex, arguably flawed logistics? Amundsen's route was shorter and on unknown territory. Scott's route was longer, but followed Shackleton's known path up the Beardmore. Amundsen's team were all expert skiers. Scott's team were not. Amundsen's sole focus was the pole. Scott's expedition had a dual scientific purpose. Historians have picked apart every decision, every piece of equipment, every diary entry, trying to pinpoint the exact reason for the different outcomes. But for you, standing there in the biting wind, the reasons don't matter. The only thing that matters is the black flag flapping in front of you. You do what you came to do. You march the extra mile to the calculated position of the geographical South Pole. You build a cairn of snow, and you plant the Union Jack. A photograph is taken. The men try to look proud, but their faces are grim masks of exhaustion and disappointment. The flag, which was meant to be a symbol of triumph, looks small and pathetic in the vast, indifferent emptiness. The psychological blow is devastating. The hope of victory was a powerful fuel, a drug that helped you ignore the pain and the hunger. Now, that drug has worn off, and you are left with only the cold, hard reality of your situation. You are 10,000 feet up, hundreds of miles from the nearest depot, in failing health, and with the long, dark shadow of winter beginning to creep back into the sky. You have reached the bottom of the world, and in doing so, you have fallen into a deeper hole than you could ever have imagined. The journey to the pole was a battle. The journey back will be a retreat. You have turned your back on the pole. The journey home begins. But home is a 900-mile walk away. The mood of the party is grim, a stark contrast to the outward journey. The fragile flame of hope that propelled you south has been extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard dread. Every step is now a retreat, a desperate, grinding struggle for survival. Your path is now the sea of ice, not a ship, but your true vessel. The Terra Nova is a world away, waiting for you at the coast. It is your only link to the outside world, your only means of escape from this frozen continent. It represents safety, warmth, food, and the end of your ordeal. The thought of it is a distant, shimmering mirage of hope. But a second, parallel tragedy is unfolding hundreds of miles away, a story you will not learn for many months. Another part of Scott's grand expedition, the Northern Party, led by Victor Campbell, had been dropped off on a different section of the coast to conduct geological surveys. The plan was for the Terra Nova to return and pick them up at the end of the summer. As the Terra Nova sailed north along the coast after dropping your depot-laying parties, the captain, Teddy Evans, who had turned back from your polar journey, searched for the Northern Party. But the sea ice was unusually thick that year. It had pressed in against the coast, forming an impenetrable barrier. The ship tried for weeks to push through, but it was impossible. The wooden hull groaned and creaked against the immense pressure of the pack ice. The captain faced a terrible choice: risk the ship and all the men on board by getting trapped and potentially crushed in the ice, or abandon the Northern Party to their fate. He made the only choice he could. The Terra Nova turned away, leaving Campbell's 6-man party stranded, with only minimal sledging rations and the clothes on their backs. They had no hut, no change of clothing, and no hope of rescue for at least a year. They were forced to overwinter in a tiny ice cave they dug out of a snowdrift, living on the few seals and penguins they could kill. Their story is one of the most incredible and lesser-known tales of survival in polar history. This event sparks a historical debate about risk management and contingency planning in Scott's expedition. Was it a freak occurrence of unusually bad ice conditions that no one could have predicted, or was the plan to drop a party in such an inaccessible location, with a pickup so dependent on favorable ice, a reckless gamble from the start? Some argue that in the heroic age, such risks were considered an acceptable part of exploration. Others contend that it was a failure of leadership to not have a more robust backup plan for the stranded party. Meanwhile, a far more immediate and visceral disaster is unfolding for another expedition, one you have no knowledge of. In the Weddell Sea, on the opposite side of the continent, Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, is caught in the pack ice. You remember Shackleton, the charismatic rival to Scott, a man who had almost reached the pole himself a few years earlier. While you were laboring towards the pole, his ship was being slowly, inexorably squeezed to death by the ice. The men of the Endurance expedition watched for months as their ship, their home, their world, is grotesquely bent and twisted by the pressure. The timbers, 3 feet thick, shriek and crack like rifle shots. The decks buckle, masts splinter and collapse. Finally, with a series of groans that sound like a dying beast, the ice punches through the hole, and the Endurance sinks, leaving its 28 men stranded on the shifting, unstable sea ice. Their connection to the world is not just out of reach, it is gone, swallowed by the ocean. Their story of survival on the ice floes, a desperate boat journey across the most violent ocean on Earth, and a final, suicidal trek across the mountains of South Georgia will become the stuff of legend. It is a story of incredible leadership and impossible endurance. These two events, the stranding of the Northern Party and the crushing of the Endurance, highlight the overwhelming power of the Antarctic environment. The ships, these marvels of engineering, these tethers to civilization, are fragile things. The ice can take them away in an instant. For you, trudging across the plateau, the Terra Nova is still a symbol of hope. You are unaware that the continent is already demonstrating its ability to sever those lifelines without warning. The ground beneath your feet feels solid, but the men of the Endurance could tell you that even that is an illusion. In Antarctica, nothing is certain except the cold and the crushing power of the ice. The journey back from the pole is a descent into a special kind of hell. The psychological blow of finding the Norwegian flag has shattered your morale, and now your bodies are beginning to fail in earnest. The return march is a race against time, starvation, and the encroaching winter. The weather turns against you with a vicious, personal fury. The temperatures plummet to levels you have not yet experienced, regularly dropping below -40 degrees. At this temperature, mercury freezes. The air is so cold it feels thick, and breathing is painful. The wind is a constant, sand-blasting force, always, it seems, blowing directly into your faces. The surfaces which were difficult on the way out become treacherous. The snow develops a texture like loose sand, making the sledges drag as if they are being pulled through mud. Every step is a monumental effort of will. Your progress slows to a crawl. You are no longer making the daily distances you had planned. This is a catastrophic development. Your survival depends on reaching the depots on schedule. A delay of even 1 or 2 days means you are consuming rations that you do not have, pushing your bodies further into a caloric deficit from which they may not be able to recover. Petty Officer Edgar Evans, the strong man of the party, is deteriorating rapidly. The frostbite on his hands is severe, and he has a festering wound that will not heal. More worryingly, he seems to be suffering from a head injury, like he sustained in a fall on the glacier. He becomes slow, clumsy, and confused. He lags behind the group, holding everyone up. The others, themselves weak and desperate, become frustrated with him. The quiet camaraderie of the team begins to fracture under the immense strain. One day, at the foot of the Beardmore Glacier, Evans collapses. He is unable to go on. The others set up the tent and try to warm him, but it's too late. He slips into a coma and dies that night. His death is a profound shock. He was supposed to be the toughest of them all. If he could fall, what hope was there for the rest of you? You bury him in the snow and march on. Now a party of 4 lay grave behind in the vast, silent wilderness. Next to fail is Captain Lawrence Titus Oates. He is in charge of the ponies that are long dead, but his own feet are now severely frostbitten. He is in constant, excruciating pain. His feet become gangrenous, and he can barely walk. He knows he is slowing the party down, jeopardizing the lives of his companions. He pleads with them to leave him behind in his sleeping bag, a request they refuse. One morning, the party is pinned down in the tent by a raging blizzard. The temperature outside is 40th. Oates knows this is the end. According to Scott's diary, he says calmly, "I am just going outside in maybe some time." He then crawls out of the tent and walks out into the blizzard, choosing to sacrifice himself rather than be a burden. You never see him again. His final act is one of the most famous, stoic, and heartbreaking gestures in the history of exploration. This moment is the subject of intense historical and ethical debate. Was Oates' sacrifice a noble act of selflessness, or was it a form of suicide brought on by unbearable pain and despair? And what of the others? Should they have physically restrained him, or did they, in their own desperate state, tacitly accept his sacrifice as their only chance for survival? There are no easy answers. It is a moment of raw, human tragedy at the absolute limit of endurance. Now you are 3 Scott, Wilson, and Bowers. You are weak, starving, and ravaged by scurvy. Your gums are bleeding, your joints are swollen, and your bodies are covered in sores. The depots, when you reach them, bring only more disappointment. The fuel cans have leaked, meaning less hot food and warm drinks. The amount of food seems less than you had expected, a devastating blow to your already fragile morale. You are just 11 miles from the next major supplied depot, 1-ton depot, a massive cache of food and fuel that would save you. But the blizzard returns with an unholy fury. It rages for days, trapping you in your tiny tent. You are too weak to march in the storm, and your food and fuel are running out. You are pinned down, just a few hours' walk from salvation. The final days are a slow, agonizing wait for an end that you know is inevitable. The heroic journey has devolved into this 3 dying men, huddled in a frozen tent, listening to the wind howl, waiting for death. The retreat has failed. The continent has won. You are lying in the tent. It is the final camp. The blizzard has been raging for 9 days. 9 days trapped in this tiny, trapping coffin of canvas and bamboo. The temperature outside is a steady, malevolent 40 degrees. The wind never stops. It is a physical wall, a solid barrier of noise and force. You are 11 miles from Wonton Depot, but you will never walk it. There is no food left. The last of the fuel was used yesterday to brew a final weak, lukewarm cup of tea. The cold is no longer just an external enemy. It has seeped inside you. It is in your bones, in your blood. It is a deep, irreversible core cold that you know you will never be warm again. You are too weak to move, Dr. Uncle Bill Wilson. The gentle artist and biologist lies on one side of you. Lieutenant Bertie Bowers, the tough, indefatigable sailor, lies on the other. They are quiet now. You are all quiet. The time for talk, for encouragement, for false hope is long past. There is only the wind and the slow, steady approach of the end. Your mind strangely is clear. The physical pain, the gnawing hunger, the agony of the frostbitten limbs has faded into a dull, distant ache. You are detached, an observer of your own final moments. You think of home, of green fields and warm sunshine, of the faces of your loved ones. These memories are no longer painful. They are a comfort, a final, internal sanctuary against the storm. You, as Captain Scott, reach for your diary. Your fingers are black with frostbite, clumsy and stiff as wood. Writing is an act of supreme, agonizing effort. But you must write. This is the only thing that will remain to tell your story. You are no longer writing for yourself. You are writing for history. You are writing for the nation. You detail the final days with a stark, almost scientific clarity. You describe the failure of the depots, the relentless blizzards, the deaths of Evans and Oates. You are building a case, not of failure, but of tragic, heroic misfortune. Our journey has been dogged by bad luck, you write. You are shaping the narrative, ensuring that your expedition will be remembered not as a defeat, but as a noble struggle against impossible odds. A little known and poignant detail of these final entries is Scott's concern for the welfare of the other men's families. In his last letters, he pleads with the nation to look after the widows and children of his companions. Even at the brink of death, his sense of duty, of responsibility for his men remains intact. I do not regret this journey, he writes, which has shown that Englishmen can endure hardships, help one another, and meet death with as great a fortitude as ever in the past. This final act of writing is one of the most debated aspects of Scott's legacy. Was it a genuine, heartfelt account of a man facing his end with courage, or was it a masterful piece of self-conscious myth-making, a deliberate attempt to craft a heroic narrative that would absolve him of any blame for the expedition's failure? Critics point to the way he frames events, subtly shifting blame to the weather, to bad luck, to anything but his own planning. Supporters see a man of immense character, facing the end with a dignity and fortitude that is almost superhuman. The truth is likely somewhere in between. He was a man, dying in a tent, trying to make sense of the catastrophe, and to salvage some meaning from the sacrifice. You write about Oates' final walk, immortalizing his sacrifice. You praise the steadfast courage of Wilson and Bowers. You are ensuring they are all remembered as heroes. Your final entry is addressed to the public. The pencil strokes are weak, the handwriting shaky. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. And then, the final, haunting postscript, written with the last dregs of his strength: for God's sake, look after our people. You put the pencil down. You place the diary and the final letters in a small bundle on your chest, where they will be found. There is nothing left to do. You pull the flap of your sleeping bag up. The light in the tent is a dim grey gloom. You can hear the steady, quiet breathing of your companions. Or perhaps it is just the sound of the wind. You close your eyes. The storm rages on. The silence inside the tent deepens. The final entry is made. The last story is told. Is it worth it? This is the question that hangs over the entire story, a ghost that haunts the frozen tent and the carefully written words in the final diary. You, as a spirit of the expedition, now float above the landscape, looking down on the aftermath. You see the search party 8 months later, finally reaching the tent. You see them brush the snow from the canvas, their faces grim. You see them bow their heads in reverence as they discover the three frozen bodies inside, you, Wilson, and Bowers, lying as if asleep. They collect the diaries, the letters, and the 35 pounds of geological samples, the fossils that prove Antarctica was once green. They collapse the tent over the bodies, creating a final tomb, and build a large cairn of snow above it, topped with a simple wooden cross. Your physical journey is over. When the news reaches the outside world, the reaction is one of profound shock, followed by an outpouring of national grief and pride. The story of your tragic failure is transformed into a tale of heroic sacrifice. You and your men become martyrs for science and for the British Empire. Oates' last walk, Scott's final diary entries, they become required reading for schoolchildren. Paragons are stoic, selfless virtue. Statues are erected. Memorials are built, just as you wished. Your narrative, the one you carefully crafted in those final, freezing hours, has succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. But the question remains, was it worth the cost? 5 lives lost on the return from the pole. The ponies dead, the dogs pushed to their limits. Another entire party, the Northern Party, stranded and presumed dead for a year, surviving by a miracle. Shackleton's expedition on the other side of the continent, a testament to what happens when things go truly wrong. The heroic age of exploration you now see is soaked in suffering. Historians and commentators have debated this question for over a century. The initial hagiographic view of Scott as a flawless hero has been challenged. Critics have emerged, pointing to the flaws in his planning, the reliance on ponies, the complex and inefficient transport system, the faulty fuel cans, the inadequate rations, the inadequacy not of a hero battling fate, but of a man whose stubbornness and prejudgment led his team to a predictable and preventable doom. They compare your expedition to Amundsen's, which was a model of efficiency and success. Amundsen got to the pole and back without losing a single man. He used the right tools, dogs and skis, planned meticulously, and had a single-minded focus on the goal. A little-known point of comparison is the diet. While you were suffering from scurvy and starvation, Amundsen's men were well fed. They had killed and eaten their dogs systematically, ensuring a constant supply of fresh meat. Their pemmican was also of a different, richer quality. The Norwegians returned from their journey having actually gained weight. This stark contrast in physical condition is perhaps the most damning evidence against the planning of your expedition. So, was it a pointless tragedy, a cautionary tale of hubris and incompetence, or is there something more? The defenders of your legacy argue that this critique misses the point. Your expedition, they say, was not just a race. It was a scientific endeavor. The geological samples you died for were a major contribution to science. The meteorological and magnetic data collected over 2 years was invaluable. The photographs taken by Ponting gave the world its first real glimpse of the Antarctic continent. Amundsen's expedition, by contrast, was scientifically almost sterile. He went, he planted a flag. He came home. You went to understand the continent, not just to conquer it. And then there is the human element. The story of your struggle, of your endurance and sacrifice, has inspired millions. It speaks to something deep in the human spirit to explore, to push the limits, to endure hardship for a cause greater than oneself. Is there value in that? Is there a form of success that isn't measured by who gets there first? You float above the cairn, the wind whipping snow around its base. The sun circles the sky. The continent remains vast, indifferent, and beautiful. It does not care about your debates. It does not remember your name. Was it worth it? The academic world will never agree. It is a question that has no single answer. It was a triumph of the human spirit. It was a scientific success. It was a patriotic failure. It was all of these things at once. The only certainty is the story itself. A story of ambition, courage, suffering, and death, etched forever into the ice at the bottom of the world. And now, the wind begins to soften. The sharp edges of the story start to blur, like a landscape seen through falling snow. The debates of historians fade into a low, distant hum, like the sound of a fan in a quiet room. The figures of Scott, Amundsen, Shackleton. They recede, becoming small, dark shapes against an endless expanse of white. The cold you felt so keenly begins to dissipate, replaced by a gentle, peaceful stillness. The immense pressure of the ice, the gnawing hunger, the desperate struggle. It all releases its grip. You are no longer on the ice shelf, but drifting on a calm, quiet sea. The crunch of boots on snow becomes the soft rustle of leaves. The howling of the blizzard becomes the sigh of a gentle breeze. You feel a sense of peace settling over you, a quiet acceptance. The struggle is over. You are in your bunk now, not the frozen, narrow plank in the hut, but your own bed. It is warm. It is wall. It is safe. The story is told. The ghosts of the Antarctic have been laid to rest. There is nothing left to do but to let the silence and the darkness cradle you. Let the gentle current of sleep pull you away from the shore of wakefulness, out into the deep, quiet ocean of dreams. There are no more sledges to pull. No more miles to march. There is only rest. The end of the article. Good night.